We are recording. Yep, we do. Yes, we do.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board meeting for Wednesday, November 18th. We're going to call this meeting to order, and if we can do roll call, please.
Leon Garcia.
Here.
Mark Joseph.
Here.
Chris Canny.
Here.
Gary Kraus. Liz Alicio.
Present.
Jill Teckel.
Present.
Alfreda Pedroza.
Present.
Delia Ramos.
Here.
Paul Doreen.
Here.
Jeff Ellsworth.
Present.
John Dunbar.
In honor of Mayor Tickle, present.
Carrie Dorman.
Present.
And Doug Weir.
I'm here.
Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. All right, let's move on to Pledge of Allegiance. If Mayor Tickle would do this honor of leading us in the pledge.
Can you see that?
Can you lead us, Jill?
Mute.
I unmuted.
All right, go ahead, Jill.
Okay, I pledge
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor
Great.
Tickle.
Okay.
All right. We're going to move back to our next item, which is adoption of the agenda. Any questions? Go ahead, Carrie.
I need to do the COVID preamble real quick.
All right, so let's pause before we adopt the agenda and let's roll the preamble, please.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar pursuant to the provision of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being webcast on the NVTA website. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available at a later time on the NVTA website. The chair will call upon board members, presenters, staff, and other speakers by name, ask that they speak clearly, and state their names before giving comments. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers and may be part of the Zoom recording. Board members and members of the public participating by Zoom who wish to speak should use the raise hand feature or *9 on their phone. Teleconference attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. Phone participants must unmute themselves by pressing *6. It is requested that public speakers state their name and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received at info@nvta.ca.gov after 5 p.m. yesterday will be entered into the record but not read out loud. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they are free to do so and should raise their hand. The chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Panelists should note that the chat feature is active. However, please be aware that anything typed in the chat will be subject to public disclosure. The chat feature is not active to attendees. In order to get the full Zoom experience, please make sure your application is up to date.
Thank you, Carrie, for rolling that preamble. I'm sure many of you would rather hear that than listen to me kind of go through that. So thank you very much. So let's move back to the agenda, the adoption of the agenda. If I don't see any questions, comments, I will entertain a motion for approval.
So move. No. Second.
You can identify, was that Mayor Dunbar? That was first? And okay, I could not distinguish. So if you could identify who was the first.
Leon Garcia first.
First by Member Garcia, second by Mayor Ellsworth. All right, roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia.
Yes.
Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Chris Canning.
Yes.
Gary Kraus is absent. Liz Alicio,
Aye.
Jill Teckle,
Aye.
Alfreda Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doreen,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Carrie Dorman,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, Carrie. Let's move on to our next item. If you're not muted, if you can please mute yourself, we're just getting some feedback. So our next item is public comment, the time when anyone can address the board on any item that's not on today's agenda. Carrie, do we have anyone that's called in? I do see Justin has raised his hand, so let me call on Justin first. Justin, you have 3 minutes.
I will do that. First of all, I want to say thank to Kate. I know she's gonna be leaving her last day December. I'm gonna be probably gonna miss her. She's doing a great job. Be working with the office a lot. And I want to thank to our transportation. We had 2 double bus this morning on Monday and Wednesday. It's amazing. Thank you all. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Justin. Carrie, do we have anyone else that called in to participate via public comment?
No, not that I'm aware of.
All right, so let's move on to our next item. This is Chairperson's Board Members MTC and ABAG update. Let me begin with the MTC Commissioner report. Busy month, in particular with the Blue Ribbon Task Force. So we have met twice since our October meeting. Very important discussions being had at the Blue Ribbon Committee. A lot of it is around equity and some of the goals that we're talking about equity. And one of the things that we spent some time on is really looking at, as we recover from this pandemic, the importance of looking at who are those transit dependent riders and what that means to them in a very equitable way. So we've been really spending some time discussing equity in that sense. As we rebuild the system, it's an opportunity to look at it through the lens of equity. We've also spent some time thinking about Network Planner, which is looking at the global transportation system for the Bay Area. Of how can we potentially look at efficiencies to maximize those in a post-COVID world. We also have some commissioners that are interested in consolidation. For Napa County, I think we have the best scenario where we have one operator. In many communities, there's multiple operators. And sometimes that just presents some challenges in the coordination of services. So there's some discussions around what that means if there were to be some consolidations in the Bay Area for transit systems. So we did spend significant time talking about that at our last Blue Ribbon Committee. Again, the goal of a seamless, reliable transportation network for the Bay Area. We also acknowledge that there's a lot of operators that are facing financial pressures as ridership is down. There's some real stressors on systems, and we don't have to look too far. The Golden Gate District and having to do layoffs because of the financial pressures they're facing. So we continue to advocate up in Sacramento and DC about the need to support our public infrastructure that is so critical. Some actions that we've taken at the MTC Commission meeting. We approved the Lifeline program, which allocates funding for the Riverside Pathway Connection in the city of Calistoga, and also the Pope Street pedestrian crossing in the city of St. Helena. We also approved $5 million to fund the Clipper Start program, which the NVTA board approved participation in. And that, in short, is subsidizing transit fares for low-income adults. This was really great to see Napa County represented in this manner. So with that, that completes my MTC report. I'm happy to answer any questions from board members. Seeing none, we're going to move right along to our representatives from ABAG, Mayor Garcia and Supervisor Ramos.
Good afternoon. Yes, on October 15th, the Executive Board of ABAG approved the Reno proposed methodology it's out for public comment. Public comment November 27 on that. The total housing allocations for the Bay Area where housing needs determination was 441,176. In Napa County, Sabrina group has come together. It's American Canyon, City of Napa County, and Yountville to discuss how we might divide our allocations and address any needs here. So public comment is open until November 27th, and anybody wishing to comment, please get on the ABAG website. That would be Rena at bayareametro.gov.
All right. Thank you, Director Garcia. Director Ramos?
Thank you so much, Director Garcia, for that update. What I will just add by way of background is that the County of Napa, together with the City of Napa, actually did submit a comment letter for that ABAG reallocation comment period that was already approved and sent off. And the question posed was as to the methodology of the calculation of using the household baseline. We will meet tomorrow again at ABAG, and as we do all know, this process of RENA approval is in pretty short order before we have to send it to HCD. So you will be receiving further updates from your respective jurisdictions, and for those that are participating in the sub-RENA process, that is going to be coming pretty quickly at all of us.
Thank you, Director Ramos. Director Dunbar.
Yes, a question, has ABAG been discussing at all the the lawsuit filings down in Southern California Association of Governments on behalf of cities? I believe it's over 50 cities have challenged their allocations. I think they're a little ahead of ABAG. Has there been any discussion about what's happening in Southern California?
There has not at this point. We are aware of it at the executive level, and staff is watching it. It hasn't come at the executive level. Really for us, I think the public comment period will give us an indication of where we're at. Certainly the County of Napa, together with the city, has a strong objection that myself and Mayor Garcia, through his vote, voiced at ABAG. So we do know that there's something coming along. And if you look at the votes of, I believe it was a 26-13 vote of 13 jurisdictions that were not supportive of the current allocation and were preferring what we are now calling the Contra Costa modeling. We do anticipate that this might not be as smooth as prior RENA cycles.
Great. Thank you, Director Dunbar. Thank you, Director Ramos. Director Ellsworth. Director Ellsworth, your hand is raised.
Sorry about that, off of mute now. When the sub-RENA issue came up, St. Helena at that time opted not to participate, but from my perspective, there is some interest in keeping an eye on it. And so if there's a way to at least keep me in the loop on where things are with the sub-RENA, also so we can see if there's ways to, look for ways to work together. So I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that we wanted to certainly keep an eye on that process.
Great. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, Mayor Ellsworth, thank you for that. What I would encourage is your planning staff to get in touch with Director Morrison at the county. There are some very strict timelines in terms of approvals of the sub-RENA process. That needs to actually be approved and sent forthwith to HCD with all of the overall approvals. So that is something that at this point would take some movement on many jurisdictional levels. So if there is interest in that, I would highly recommend reaching out to Director Morrison at the earliest possible time.
Thank you, Director Ramos. Director Dunbar coming back.
Yes, at the risk of turning this into a housing meeting, I believe that it is too late for the jurisdictions that chose not to opt into the sub-RENA to participate. Remember, that was one of the criteria, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly, we can continue to inform the Up Valley jurisdictions that chose not to participate, but I don't think you can now join in. That was one of the criteria that we had to either opt in or you could not opt in the future. If I remember correctly.
I believe you're right, Mayor Dunbar. But I just wanted to make sure we kept our eyes on it. If there's something we can do to be proactive, so that maybe a window opens at some point.
All right, and it sounds like
Thank you.
we'll make sure staffs are talking to each other as Supervisor Ramos recommended. So thank you for some great dialogue on some important housing issues. So let's move on to Director's update. Kate Miller.
Thank you, Chair Pedrosa. Let's see here. The first thing I wanted to do is to introduce our new Paratransit Coordinating Council Board Member Representative. Beth Cahiga has resigned her position representing the PCC. This is a non-voting member role. And in her place is Doug Weir, who was appointed by the PCC a couple months ago. And Doug has not been able to participate in meetings. So I just wanted to make sure we gave him a shout out. He has been involved with the Bind when it was operated by the city of Napa. He has also had a presence at NCTPA and now NVTA since its inception. Mr. Weir has served on the Paratransit Coordinating Council for almost 21 years. He also served on the Vine Consumer Advisory Committee and now serves on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Mr. Weir also represents the Paratransit Coordinating Council on the Technical Advisory Committee. So welcome, Director Weir. Let's see. I wanted to point out to you that there is a copy of a letter that was written by the Bay Area small operators and directed to Jim Spearing, the chair of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. The letter is commenting on the goals. Key is an overriding interest to evaluate operational consolidation and governance of the region's smaller operators. The letter requests involvement by those governing bodies, such as yourself, that oversee the smaller transit operators and to focus on operational considerations and efficiencies, as well as evaluating other hurdles such as union rules, contracts, cost, or service contracts, cost implications, as a first step to understanding any implication involved with consolidation. I also wanted to let you know that we have launched the Riding with Confidence initiative. This is a marketing approach to instill confidence in riders that NVTA is following and indeed exceeding industry standards to ensure the system is clean and sterile. The initiative also introduces and encourages riders to use safe transit protocols such as the quiet ride to limit talking, which reduces the spread of the virus, and wearing masks. Staff has sent out messaging on social media and on NVTA and Vine websites and have run some radio spots encouraging riders to come back to the transit system. I also wanted to just share with you that several of us have been invited to speak at two conferences this week, where they're virtual conferences, but something that we participate in every year. Danielle and I were both invited to speak at the virtual Focus on the Future conference. The Focus on the Future is an annual conference sponsored by the Self-Help County Coalition, which is an organization comprised of 30 counties whose voters have approved sales tax measures for transportation purposes. And also Robin Craig this morning spoke on our efforts associated with responding to emergencies at the California Transit Association's virtual annual fall conference. So both Danielle and Robin did a great job, so I just wanted to commend them on their work. The last but not least, I have some really great news. The Soskel Junction project is on the California Transportation Commission's staff recommendations to receive $25 million in Senate Bill 1 Solutions for Congested Corridor. And I can't tell you how excited all of us were. And some of us cried when we got the notice. So this would fully fund the project, and it's scheduled to break ground in 2022. I just want to say this was truly a team effort. All staff members should be acknowledged for their roles, but I want to especially acknowledge Rebecca Shank, Sanjay Mishra, Danielle Schmitz, Robin Craig, and Roxana Marati, who pulled together and a highly polished and very complicated grant application. So congratulations to us. I look forward to seeing all of you at the ribbon cutting, including you, Jill, even though you're going to be leaving us. So that concludes my report for today.
Thank you very much, Director Miller. Indeed, some really good news that's needed in this moment in time. And I just commend our staff for all their work. This is significant revenue, significant funding for a critical project for Napa County. So thank you. Any questions for Kate? Seeing none, we're going to move on to Caltrans update. I know Kelly's with us.
Sure. Can you hear me? This is Kelly
Yes.
Hirschberg. Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Supervisor Ramos has a question. Am I seeing?
Supervisor Ramos, did you have a question for Director Miller?
I did. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Just by way, one, congratulations to staff. 25 million is certainly it's a dream come true, especially for those of us down in the South County who have to bear during pre-COVID times a 47-minute commute to go simply 14 miles. So thank you very much for all of your work. One of the things as we move forward, knowing that breaking ground is in our future, I would certainly appreciate that this project being such a large capital project that is going to be underway, if we are able to include regular updates, but also in those regular updates have a financial overview of the budgeted amount, what has been allocated thus far, percentage of use, so that we can make sure we keep a really close eye on cost overruns. We have done that at the county. It's been incredibly helpful, especially for these large projects. And I think that that would be very helpful going forward. This isn't just a drop in the bucket for us. And again, thank you so much and congratulations on getting 25 million. Make sure the check clears.
Thank you, Supervisor Ramos. Kelly, let's go back to Caltrans update.
Sure. So we have actually a couple of presentations. So what I wanted to do is actually first turn to Byron. He's actually been with us with Caltrans starting April this year. And his role has been addressing director's order to tunnels and tubes and others. So he has a quick presentation related to the director's order associated with the recent wildfires. So Byron, are you available?
Yes, Kelly, speaker check is, can you hear me good?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Good, good, okay. So let me share, should I share my screen now or for the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, you do that. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, here we go. Okay, again, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is just an overview of the director's order that Caltrans has in the Napa County area. So starting off.
Byron, we can't hear you. Byron, we cannot hear you. Kelly, I'm not sure if you can still hear us.
Yeah, yes, I could hear you. Let me see. I think we're having some audio issue. So basically, let me see if I could come over his voice. Or... Supervisor Pedrosa, let me just text him real quick, okay? Sorry about that.
Okay. For all those that are viewing, we're just having some technical difficulties here with the report from Caltrans, so bear with us while we try to re-engage. And Kelly, maybe if we don't hear from him back, is there another presentation that we potentially could go to while he re-engages?
let's see. I think we could certainly do that, or maybe he could come back next month to provide us updates. So actually, so maybe what I could do is let me bump them off
Yeah.
and see. Yeah, so maybe that might be the better way. Okay. Yeah.
All right, let's
try
if
that.
staff can remove their presentation. So do you have another presentation, Kelly, to upload?
Yeah, sure. Can you see it? Or no, not yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay, sure.
Here we go. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. So first of all, I wanted to actually congratulate Kate and NVTA on receiving SCCV funds, and as a project partner, we look forward to working with you, Kate, and breaking ground. So, woohoo! You know, we got money, right? Go up to construction. So, quite excited about that. So, with that, I also wanted to just give you a quick update on this is our construction project on State Route 128 at Capel. So update related to the project, and we also have a planned detour or full closure, which will impact the motorists. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to inform you all and what the project is about. So once again, the project is located on 128, near the Capel Valley Fire Station, and this will be the west of 121 Junction. So, what are we doing here? So basically it's a bridge replacement. So original bridge was constructed in 1956 with a 3-span bridge, right? Basically you have 2 abutments and the columns in the creek itself. And this is actually an active landslide. As there's a lot of these horizontal drains that coming up from the side of the hillside that you are traveling through there. And our abutment 1 and the pier 2, which is a column in the creek, is within the landslide location. So over the years, these members has been slowly drifted. So it required for us to actually replace the bridge entirely. So back in 2014, we complete the project initiation document, and they got it programmed into a SHOP, State Highway Operation and Protection Program. And we had a public meeting when we released the draft environmental document in February of 2016, and we reached the RTF, milestone, which is ready to list. Basically, we secure all the property rights and receive all the permits, regulatory permits associated with it, and complete the contract document in June of 2018. So the rest of 2018, we work with the CCC of allocating construction funds, advertise a project, and bid open. And in early 2019, we were able to award the contract to the Golden Ball Construction. So since then, we've been working on this project. So basically, we'll be replacing the bridge slightly wider and longer at the existing alignment. So the project, so this is actually stage construction, how we intend to construct the bridge. So the existing bridge has actually a steel girder, so you really cannot cut into pieces to do the stage construction. So we're doing slightly different. And then I think I might have mentioned to you previously, I'm quite excited to use a steel module bridge. So this is actually something that is a relatively new that we are trying first time in District 4. So we are renting this prefabricated steel module bridge, and this allows us to save time and cost and reduce the environmental impact. So stage 1, we install that and then construct the approach associated with it. And stage 2, we route the traffic to the steel module bridge, and we demolish the existing bridge and the columns associated with it. We're working on the subsurface of the foundation and building up the columns and the abutment and bank cap. And we expect to complete that by middle of December. Now, so the last step that is left before we pour the deck is placing this thing called girders, right? So since this is actually a 3-span bridge, we're looking at about 18 girders. That is about 100 feet in length. So previously, what we intend to do was to use a really large crane to place these girders from the either side of the bridge. However, when we actually took a closer look, these girders are 100 feet in length and in such a close proximity to the existing steel module bridge. We thought that that's probably not the very most prudent or safe way to swing that long beam, right? So we went back and looked at that. What's another way that we could actually do this work? So we worked with the manufacturer of this module bridge. What we intend to do is launch it from this prefabricated steel bridge. So basically what they will require is that we need to use the steel module bridge to place the girders adjacent to it. So in order for us to do that, unfortunately, we need to close the stair route 128 for 3 nights. So basically what we intend to do is from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights. We're looking to close it from Monday night of December 21st to the Thursday morning of 5 a.m. But during the day, meaning it's 5 a.m. to 7 p.m., it will be open. Just the 3 consecutive nights is needed to place these 18 girders. So with that, we're going to actually place portable CMS signs throughout the area to inform the motorists of upcoming work and detour. So, and these will be placed at least 14 days prior to the commence of the detour and that piece of the work. So basically, this is a locational closure. So, unfortunately, we understand that this could actually add potentially 70 minutes or about 40 miles of detour. If you happen to be over here and you need to go over here, you cannot go across the bridge. You have to go all the way around to the Silverado trails in this way. So we work with the County of Napa and others to come up with this detour plan. So we like to do it as quickly as we can, but it is needed. So part of my presentation is to just kind of inform you for upcoming detour. So this completes my current presentation. And there's one more thing that I'd like to just add is the, let me see, is that Ritchie Creek Bridge, which is actually bridge replacement near the state park with State Route 29. We are intent to go out to the public circulation for draft environmental document in December. So when the public notice comes out, we make sure that we work with the NVTA to put that up and provide information in advance. So that completes my presentation, and I'll take any questions you have. And if you have none, happy Thanksgiving.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Greatly appreciate that information. And given the closure, I think communication, working closely with the county and app is going to be critical. So again, that's just our request to try to have that communication up front so we can work with you on how do we message that to residences in the general area. A question I have, Kelly, in terms of some of these impacted, separate and apart from this, during the fires, we saw Caltrans infrastructure be impacted by the fires, the guardrails, the wooden posts. Is Caltrans looking at, as you're rebuilding the infrastructure, instead of doing the traditional wooden poles, are you looking at using materials that are a little bit more fire resistant?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that the previous presentation didn't pan out, because that was exactly what we intend to show. So we had some of these guardrails that just have a burnt post, but you have a railing sitting on the side of the road as well as a sign structure. So, I don't know fully as far as Pedrosa, if it can be applicable for all locations, but I think we are making some consideration as of what's appropriateness for installing in that matter. So, but I think I'll work with Brian, because he did have a nice presentation to talk about a couple of the director's orders, and we could bring it back next month.
I would really welcome that opportunity to learn more about how we can rebuild a little bit more resiliently as well. So thank you for that, Kelly. I know we do have some questions from board members. Mayor Ellsworth.
The windows on that closure, the full closure, what were the windows on that again?
It's a 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. from December 21st, like the Monday night, to the 24th of Thursday morning. But it will be 3 consecutive nights, Mayor Ellsworth. So during the day, it will be open.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I echo the sentiments for communication as much as we can get out there, but knowing that it's open during the day is helpful. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. Do we have any other questions for Kelly? If not, Kelly, on behalf of the board, thank you for your informative presentations, and we look forward to the next meeting where we can learn a little bit more about some of the rebuilding infrastructure. So, Kelly, again, thank you very much. So let's move on to our next set matter. This is presentations, and this is we're very honored and privileged to be in this moment where I'm going to kick it off, and this is a proclamation for a person we all have in very high regard and significant esteem for, Mayor Tekel. So I think we've already provided her the proclamation. There it is with some wonderful flowers. That is great. Thank you for you all putting that picture there. So let me just read the proclamation here. Whereas the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, Joint Powers Authority, was created in June 1998. And whereas in July 1998, Jill Tekel was appointed to the Napa City Council to serve as one of the first members of the Board of Directors when the agency was still known as the Napa County Transportation Planning Agency. And whereas in July 2000, Jill was selected to serve as chair for the term from 2000 to 2002. And whereas Jill's 22 years of dedicated service as a board member, many prominent transportation improvement projects have been completed, including State Route 29, the Trancas Undercrossing Project, the Jamison Canyon Widening Project, the Trancas Park and Ride Lot Project, the Sosco Gateway Transit Center, the Oak Knoll segment, and the Napa Valley Vine Trail Project, the California Boulevard Roundabouts, and the great pandemic of the 2020 stop-to-stop on-demand transit service in the city of Napa. Whereas Jill was a vital team member and her involvement was critical for the passage of the 2012 Measure T 1 cent sales tax for local streets and roads improvements. Now, therefore, I proclaim that on this 18th day of November 2020, that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors hereby dedicates November 18th as Jill Tekel Appreciation Day. So, Jill, as someone that worked with you on the City Council, this is just such a special moment. You are an incredible asset to Napa County. Your legacy is seen and viewed everywhere we go. And it's unfortunate because this Zoom experience is not going to do it justice, but we have been very, very fortunate to benefit from your leader. You often remind us it's not I, it's we. It's how do we find consensus, even in the hardest moments. It was never about Jill Tekel. It was about the city of Napa and the county. And I'm never going to forget that. And I still remember we had the opportunity to host the governor of a state of Mexico. And it was great. It was you. It was Supervisor Dodd at that time and myself. And he didn't want anything to do with us. He wanted to talk to the mayor. And I think that just symbolizes the importance of a mayor in a worldwide scale. And you did it justice. You always represented us with such class and professionalism, Joe. So we're going to miss you. But thank you for your leadership. And I know some of your colleagues want to say a few words. And I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Canning first.
Thank you very much, Alfredo. Jill, I don't even know where to start. It's been a pleasure. I've been on this NVTA for, I think, coming up on almost 10 years. And it has been an absolute pleasure, both professionally, but socially, but also it's all been fun working with you. And, to echo what Alfredo said, it's always been a we, not a me, not an I, when working with you. And I've sincerely appreciated that. And it's also was very warming at times when things were getting a little bit difficult to be able to glance your way and get a smirk or a smile out of you and let me know it's all okay and we keep moving on. So thank you very much for what you've done for your community, and then what you've done for the county as a whole, and certainly what you've done for me in my career as an elected, with our sidebars and input, advice, and suggestions. Now, considering it is Mayor Teckle Day, I will invite you up to Calistoga today to have cocktails with me and inside any of our bars if any of them were allowed to be open. So with that said, we'll have to postpone it until after this little pandemic. But Jill, thank you and congratulations for all that you've done for this agency and for the county as a whole.
Thank you, Mayor Canning. Mayor Dunbar.
Yes, Mayor Teckle, we still have outdoor service available in Yountville. So if you'd like to come up and enjoy a glass of wine, you're welcome here, first of all, in the heart of the Napa Valley. I'm sorry the Crown has shut down, but I do want to mention, as we were approaching this day and this proclamation, recognizing your many, many years, decades of service to the entire Napa County community, I started thinking back to those days at the Randolph and Fourth building, and it's been over 10 years for me, I think. One of the longest board members on NVTA, formerly NVTA-TA, and you've always been there. Your institutional knowledge is going to be so sorely missed. Nobody can bring the kind of perspective and really the broad knowledge that you have. So we are all going to collectively try to make up for the void that your departure is going to leave. But thank you. I know Chair Pedroza listed many of the accomplishments that were the higher profile ones, but it was the regular monthly participation and guidance, as Mayor Canning was referencing. There was always a calm voice that came from you, even when it wasn't happening around the entire dais. And that really helped reset conversation so many times in a positive direction. It also was much appreciated that you always had to leave by 4 o'clock to go to Napa Sand meetings, and that inspired us all to try to wrap up. So we're going to have to come up with another reason to finish by 4 o'clock, but we'll find it. But thank you. We look forward to your civilian participation around us. You've been such a great asset in so many different boards countywide. I know the residents of the city of Napa have been able to call you their own, but we also would like to share in an extended family kind of dynamic that you've been such a great benefit and a friend and a colleague for us throughout the valley. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. And I'm going to ask Kate or Carrie if we can do the gallery view so we could actually see each other. And up next, we have Mayor Ellsworth.
Thank you. And I'll be brief. I'm a little newer to this, but what I recognize, many things that Mayor Teckle's brought, and one of the legacies I think is a conversation as we're having now. This conversation between the jurisdictions and the leadership from the mayor of our largest city to be open to these dialogues and working together. And so for that, I'm truly grateful. And just the opportunity for the brief time to have spent working with you, it's just much appreciated, and to have that leadership to guide us. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. Mayor Garcia.
Yes, Jill, been a lot of years and a lot of work accomplished. I really thank you for your leadership in the organization. And it definitely has been a long journey with and a great accomplishment achieved in many places. I think probably I remember the first when I was involved with the Randolph Street location was the Highway 12, the measure that did not pass, and what we learned from that on how to get things to agreement with the public. And anyway, I just want to say thank you. You leave a great legacy of good work accomplished, and I know you will continue to be active out there doing great things.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. Do we have any other directors? All right.
Chair
would you like
Pedroza, I don't have the ability to raise my hand, but I think I would love to say something just really quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jill, I am so going to miss you, and I know the staff will too. And I know that we're going to be working together on Leadership Napa Valley, so that's great. But you have just been a wonderful inspiration and a great mentor to me, and I just wanted to wish you well. And I'm sure we'll run into each other in the neighborhood. So good luck to you, and thank you so much for being such a great board member.
Thank you, Kate. And I know we also have Mike on the line. Mike, did you want to address Mayor Tekel as well?
There we go. Yes, Jill, how are you? Chairman of the board and the board members, I'm Mike Sedan. I was the first director of NVTA, and as such had a chance to work with Jill in the early days. And I just want to, one remembrance, Jill, and that was when you started as our board chair, you took the time to meet with me at a restaurant right across from Yountville City Hall. It was a Mexican restaurant. We sat on the patio, and for an hour and a half before each meeting, you'd go through each agenda item with me. And well, I understood the complexities of the transportation part. I did not understand the politics of the county, and you helped me understand that. And but linking those two, I think it was very good. So I really want to thank you for that effort. And the other thing that the board probably should know, just real briefly, there was that time when the city owned the bus system, and there was also the time when Transportation Development Act monies went for streets and roads and could be used for transit. Jill was instrumental in working with the city, who was the major player in that at that time, to transfer that to the NCTPA board. So in a sense, she's the mother of good transportation in Napa Valley, and deserves credit for that. So thank you, Jill. And I just wanted to offer my best to you in retirement, and hope to see you sometime in the future. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. Great words, and thank you for coming back. Mayor Tekel, any words?
Just a couple. You know, when you talk about decades of meetings, that makes me sound old, and it has been a long time. And I have been with NVTA, and I think we were in Yountville when I first started going to meetings, like Mike suggested. You know, I love those meetings, and I got a free lunch, so I figured it was a pretty good deal. And I appreciated your story talking about mayors. You actually took that whole interaction better than Dodd did. He just never could get over it, that these high-level officials would kind of brush him aside and go, "Oh, we need to talk to the mayor." So it has been delightful to be the mayor. And thank you for my proclamation, and I got a plaque, and I got beautiful flowers. And I'm also looking, I think it's in the back of my plaque, Kate, is my Bottle Rock parking pass for future Bottle Rock events. So that's a lovely retirement gift. And I thank you all. And if I actually was on an editorial board meeting this morning and needed to, they asked me questions about what would you like to, be your legacy, and it was about the working together, and it was about collaboration. So it really warmed my heart that was the pieces that my fellow board members remember me for. So Scott's coming. You're going to have a great replacement, and thanks for all the work that you do. And I will no longer, I'll just leave with the story. When my daughter was really little, she would play, like some people play house, and some people would play nurse, and some people play teacher, and my daughter played go to meeting lady. So I think I finally got it out of my system, and I'm ready to move on to another hobby than going to meetings. Thank you all.
Well, Joe, you deserve what's next. You truly do. So
thank you.
This is many recognitions to come. So again, thank you. We also have another recognition and proclamation to give here. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Director Miller, who's going to do us the honor of recognizing Carrie at this point. Director Miller?
I know this is indeed a bittersweet day for us. So I am going to read a proclamation of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority on the occasion of Carolyn E. Sanderlin's retirement. Whereas Carrie began her career on November 1st, 1999 at the then Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency and Art Council. And whereas Carrie was hired to provide administrative support to the executive director and to serve as the board secretary. And whereas in 2007, Carrie assumed responsibility for human resources and benefits. And whereas Carrie's performance balancing the interest of employees with the sometimes, but not always, imperious executive directors resulted in her promotion to manager overseeing all things human resources in 2008. And whereas Carrie burned through 13 board chairs, countless board members, 5 acting or permanent executive directors, 6 transit managers, 3 planning directors, 5 finance directors, 1 compliance manager, and a webmaster of dubious distinction. And whereas Carrie misses the quiet days when the agency focused mostly on planning and programming, and when staff gathered at compadres in Yountville after the board meetings. And whereas Carrie will greatly miss board and committee packet development, transcribing minutes, and sending many, 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 many reminders to the NVTA board, the NVTA-TA board, the Technical Advisory Committee, the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, and the CAC and the PCC. And whereas Carrie will especially miss the endless photocopying in response to public records requests and grand jury investigations. And whereas Carrie frequently brought her work home with her, including her current husband, Peter, and whereas Carrie's sincerity, warmth, and sympathetic ear will be greatly missed by the staff of NVTA. And whereas Carrie's dog Ella will also be greatly missed by the staff of NVTA. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 18th day of November 2020 that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors does hereby dedicate December 30th, 2020 as Carolyn E. Sanderlin Day. And be it further proclaimed on the 18th day of November 2020 that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors and staff do hereby recognize and extend warmest congratulations to Carrie for her service and commitment to NVTA, and wish her a long and happy retirement. Congratulations, Carrie. We're gonna miss you.
I wasn't gonna
Carrie.
cry. Thank you.
No, you deserve this. You truly do. And I know probably the hardest part of the job was dealing with the board chairs, especially my predecessors, Mayor Canning and Dunbar. I know they did this to you. But again, we are. I always say behind a great organization is great people. And it's people that make organizations what they are. And you are an example of what all the goodness this organization represents, Carrie. So we're very, very fortunate to have you. But you too have earned what's next. And that's the beauty of life, right? You get to enjoy the next days. So we do have some folks that wish to say some kind words. Mayor Canning.
Carrie, thank you very much. I will say that being the chair was made a heck of a lot easier because of you. And a little special bond Carrie and I have is she would either send me an email or call me or text me, and it would usually lead with me responding, "Oh crap, I forgot," or "I have to do that." So thank you for keeping me on the on track and in check. And it is, to what Alfredo just said, a very well-deserved next chapter of your life. Have fun, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you.
Mayor Dunbar.
Chair Pedrosa, thank you for the kind introduction. We, unfortunately, I think we lived down to that introduction. Carrie, I know that I can probably speak for all of us past chairs who have driven you into retirement. because we needed such hand-holding.
Very true.
As Kate, I think, identified the numerous reminders, because you were so proactive in reaching out when we would have agenda reviews. And by the way, I'm sorry that going digital took so many years, because you could have saved about 50% of your work time not copying 200-page volumes of board packets. But you did such an amazing job of managing managing, I think, all of us in the role of chair. It's a very complicated agency because there's so much going on countywide, and you always had it lined up, ready for us to, take over the meetings and run them smoothly. But those would never have happened were it not for the support that you gave each and every one of us. And then even throughout the meetings, you kept us in the right direction. You kept us informed. And unfortunately, so much of that was unseen by the public and behind the scenes of so many. And hopefully today and going forward, we can shine a brighter light on all of the support that you gave us for even more years than Mayor Tekel, if that's possible, or at least as many. But thank you so much for making my job as a board member and as a chair easier. Really, thank you for the dedication you've given to the agency, and all the best in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Mayor Tekel.
Carrie, this is really special. You and I kind of learned the game together. We both came on the board and you were working with the board about the same time. And we had the Mike Zidane years. Gosh, Mike, it was really fun to see you. We really tried to create the framework of this new agency and how it would work countywide, how we'd get bigger bang for the buck. And Carrie, you were part of the energy that kept us going and helped us get where we are today. So enjoy your retirement. I have totally enjoyed working with you. And if I've got to go, I guess I feel okay that we're going together.
Me too.
Mayor Garcia.
Carrie, I remember those big, thick, heavy board packets. That'd be a lot of weight to carry around. That was so much work. I think I really appreciate the fact there was a problem to solve. Carrie, you're the one go-to to solve it. And I don't know what I'm going to do now about where's my reminder so I don't forget. I think Chris and I are in the same boat on that one. But remarkable work, a great heart, and a great deal of support for all of us. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. And closing us is Mike Zidane. Mike.
I know.
Mike, you still here?
It's still here, yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Carrie, wow, you're retiring. This is amazing. And, I'm going to take credit not only for hiring you, big deal, right? But for giving you the happiest of marriage in your career. Because I hired Peter shortly afterwards, and the two of you are so great together. I think Kate would agree with me. You are the heart and soul of this agency. And I know the board members feel that way too. And what the board may not know is that, so I hired you, there were only 4 staff members. We were syncing, you came in and organized everything, the board agendas, the minutes. And then I asked you to take on the responsibility of doing the 9 county CMAs. And for 5 years, you headed that up. There's not a CMA director in the Bay Area from the first decade of the year 2000 that doesn't know Carrie. So you did that too, thank you. I always, real briefly, and I mean this the best possible way, I always thought of Carrie, and you've got to be of a certain age to understand this, there was a sitcom called WKRP in Cincinnati. Some of you may remember that. But in the sitcom, Lonnie Anderson, who was at the front desk, controlled WKRP. She knew everything. If you wanted anything done, you didn't go to the boss, you went to Lonnie Anderson. And that's the way it is with Carrie. If you wanted to know anything, and I know all the board members, you all know this, Carrie was the person to go to. So Carrie, congratulations. So good to hear that you're finally retiring, and I hope to see you and Peter real soon. Thanks.
Mike, and thank you just for coming back. I think that's a really thoughtful gesture, so appropriate. Carrie, any words?
Well, I really don't know what to say. It's been a great ride. It's happened a lot faster than I thought it would be 21 years ago. I thought 20 years, I have plenty of time, but it's come really fast. And I just want you all to know that the agency has a great replacement behind me, and she will remind all of you. So there is no worry about that. She's going to be great, and it's going to be a smooth transition, and you won't even know I'm gone. So thank you all.
We will know you're gone because it's tough shoes to fill, Carrie, but thank you. All right. We needed some good news, and this is really great news to celebrate some important people that deserve what's next. So great day for the agency. Seeing no one else that wishes to participate. Again, on behalf of the board, Carrie and Jill, we wish you all the best, and thank you for sharing. Also to your families, for sharing you with us as well. These are tough jobs, but thank you. All right, so let's move on to our consent items. We have 5 items on consent. Do we have any questions from board members on any item? Do we have any public comment, Carrie, on any items on consent?
I have not received any.
Perfect. I will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved, Dunbar.
I heard first by Joseph, second by Dunbar. You're all testing my hearing. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Mayor Canning had to step out for a brief minute.
Liz Alicio,
Aye.
Jill Teckle,
Aye.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos, Paul Doreen,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Carrie Dorman,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Carrie. So let's move on to our regular items. Our first regular item is 11.1. This is the 2021 federal and state legislative advocacy program and project priorities and legislative update. Going to be provided by Kate Miller. This is on page 59 to 71 for the public. Kate, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Pedrosa. Following my, will be very brief, I hope, presentation on the changes that we made to the advocacy program this year will be our state legislative advocate, Steve Wallach, who will give us sort of an overview of what he thinks we might be able to expect over the next year and on the state side. So, every year staff presents to you a list of policy and funding and projects that we are asking your direction for and permission to advocate for. And we do this so that when there's opportunities to pursue funding or to have a voice in some sort of policy decision, we don't have to come back to you given the timing of our board meetings. And so we just want you to kind of give us a general blessing of some of the things that we support, that we should support over the years. So a few changes on the federal side. Obviously, we've added the federal stimulus funding to support transportation, local government families, and to stimulate the economy. And then we also sort of reprioritize the federal transportation authorization bill. The current bill, which is the Fixing of America's Service Transportation or FAST Act, is set to expire this year. So this is really important. And in that endeavor, we continue to support some sort of fix to fund the highway fund, which is, as you know, funded by a gas tax that hasn't been increased for a very long time, since the early 90s. We've also added streamlining FEMA reimbursement processes. This has become more and more important to us. As you know, and you'll hear a presentation on later on about our involvement in supporting the EOC efforts to both evacuate people who may be in threat of fire, and also to support the efforts around the coronavirus pandemic. On the state side, specifically in the funding arena, we've also added some sort of stimulus bill or funding to support and stimulate the economy, including financial aid to transportation and local governments. We've also refined the language that would allow direct investments in transit to be an eligible cap and trade offset to help foster private investment in public transit. Currently, we basically get revenues for cap and trade fees, and that those fees then fund programs for transit. I think this would support direct investment, and it wouldn't, necessarily go through all of the state bureaucracy. And that's something that I've been interested in doing for a long time, and it hasn't gotten anywhere, but it might now, because the governor has, as you know, passed EON 7920, or signed. This is an executive order addressing climate change. So there's going to be a lot of changes associated with that. And so that's another thing we've added to the list. There is a specific element that we are working with the CalSTA, State Transportation Agency, on their understanding how we can use existing funding to support climate change as it is associated with transportation. We've also added specific language to support new funding to improve corridor operations and transit connectivity. And this is something that's related to the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Those are, an ongoing discussion there about what that's going to look like. So I didn't frame it too tightly. We also added something on environmental resiliency. We wanted to make sure that we could support state programs that minimize natural disaster that impact transportation infrastructure and public safety power shutoff. So specifically, the fires do cause a lot of damage to infrastructure, and I'm sure there are potentially other natural disasters, knock on wood. I don't want to mention them now because of 2020. But also, the public safety power shutoff is more and more a problem for us as we transition from a diesel fueled fleet to an electric fleet. And then on the regulatory reform side, we want to support efforts that identify solutions for improving transit coordination and connectivity, again, for the Blue Ribbon Task Force related work. And finally, we've added language to create greater flexibility for jurisdictions to establish other metrics for adjusting speeds other than the 85th percentile. What the 85th percentile does is it basically takes the speeds that are happening on the corridor and then adjusts them based on what's happening, and with some regard, but not total regard, for safety and Vision Zero efforts, which is something that we have focused on the countywide transportation plan, and those are part of the goals and objectives that you've already adopted. And on the project priority side, we basically added parallel routes that we included in the State Route 29 comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. We've included projects that are going to be in the countywide transportation plan, as well as Plan Bay Area. And we've added projects included in the IMOLA Complete Streets Corridor Plan, which you adopted this year. And then finally, we've added regional electric vehicle charging network in addition to bus charging. And those are the changes we made. And I would ask that the board respond by taking action on that, and then listening to Steve Wallach's presentation after that.
So Kate, let's do it all in one motion. So if Steve's ready, let's just have Steve provide us his legislative update.
Sure.
Well, good afternoon. Steve Wallach with Platinum Advisors. To give you a little update on what's going on, or what's not going on. Right now, I mean, with the elections at the state level, I think still there are some people don't think it's done to the federal level. At the state level in the assembly, not much difference in the makeup of the assembly. There's going to be about 61 Democrats, 18 Republicans, 1 independent. So it's all kind of held firm with what was in this current session. In the Senate, it looks like the Democrats are going to pick up a couple seats. So the caucus will grow to about 31, and then 9 Republican members left in the Senate side. Those seats down in Southern California, Josh Newman, who was in the Senate, looks like he was then recalled, and now he won that seat back against Senator Ling Chang. and will likely be returned to Sacramento. And then Dave Min looks like he is ousted Senator Morlock, who's held that seat in Orange County for quite a while. So that moves on. With that, there's going to be, with every election, it seems like it just spawns more elections with special elections. So in the Senate, you have Senator Holly Mitchell, who's elected as the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors. Her seat's going to open up. There's going to be a special election for that. The whole host of folks are going to be running for that seat. One of them that's a likely contender is Assemblywoman Kamala Dove. So if she wins that, then it's going to open up a seat in the assembly that has to be filled. So expect a series of special elections somewhere in the state with all this. In addition, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level with appointments, whether people are going to be moving around back to DC for various federal appointments. That might also open up other elected positions that might either be filled by the governor or through special elections. So a lot of uncertainty looking at the state level right now, but I think all for the better. With the state budgets, we had with the pandemic, we had a dire drop in revenues, about a $54 billion deficit is what they estimated last June when they adopted the budget. So we're looking, but with that, I think those were overly pessimistic assumptions because the revenues are continue to increase. Revenues to date from, well, actually through October now they have that, is about the budget surplus is about $11 billion and growing. The LAO just released today its fiscal outlook for the fiscal year coming up, and they project a potential windfall of about $26 billion for the state going into 21-22 fiscal year. Now it's way uncertain. Even they estimate a wide range of fluctuations, how volatile it is. If that target's going to be hit, it could be $10 billion more, it could be $10 billion less, but they're still looking at a pretty solid estimate of about at least $11-12 billion surplus going into the next fiscal year. They are cautioned that most of that money is one-time money, so they do say you can't really spend it on ongoing programs. They would likely split it. They would suggest splitting it between putting into reserves and then put the other half on one-time expenditures. Because they do point out that there is a structural deficit in the budget with revenues kind of growing on average about 1% a year, while it costs caseload expense growth is growing about 4.4% a year. So they do have a long-term deficit that they're looking at. With that, the budget should be out by January 8th. And so we'll be off to the races then with how the governor plans to make up for the cuts in the current fiscal year, as well as address that structural deficit. The 2020 session, as y'all know, was pretty much cut short with the pandemic. Probably 3/4 of the bills that were introduced were dropped because they had to focus on just pandemic response as well as wildfire response in addressing those situations. So it wasn't a whole lot of activity legislatively. A couple of the bills, one of the bills that was dropped was our own bill AB 3209, which is someone Aguirre Curry was going to carry regarding some surplus property at the Southfield Junction project sites. We will be talking to her about maybe reintroducing that this year. In addition, bills that we supported, SB 288 by Senator Wiener, provided a limited term for CEQA exemptions for transit and active transportation projects throughout the state to help accelerate those. And then as far as like pandemic bills, SB 1159 by Senator Hill, this is one that provided a rebuttable presumption on COVID cases for essential workers other than frontline like law enforcement and firefighters. They had a different standard for them. So that bill's in effect. SB 288 goes into effect on January 1st. So what to expect in this coming year? With the new session means new committee assignments, new chairs. The biggest, I think, gap right now for the transportation world is in Senate transportation. Senator Jim Bell has been turned out, so there will definitely be a new chair for Senate transportation. It's unclear yet who that will be. In the past, they always talked about Senator Dodd, but he might be happy with GO, where he currently chairs that committee. And then also Senator-elect Josh Newman. I've heard rumors that he's expressed an interest in becoming chair of Senate transportation. So as you'll recall, Senator Newman was the one that cast the deciding vote for SB 1, and that's what triggered his recall election in that district. So One things we don't know are going to be the operating rules with the pandemic. Last year, they cut back the bills, cut back the hearings. We don't know if there's going to be limits yet on bill topics that can be introduced going into this year, and the committee operations. We do know the committees will likely be operating with a very limited number of hearings because of we'll likely continue with the remote hearings on Zoom and conference calls, and only be operating basically out of maybe 3 hearing rooms as they move forward. So that means each committee will only get 1 or 2 chances to hear all the bills. So they're going to be very selective in what bills they move forward. And then finally, what capital access do we have? It's been, while the process has worked this past year, I think on the hearing process, how the hearings were structured in the floor sessions, it does make it difficult, to access people. Like a lot of the times you learn things just by walking through the Capitol and running into people and friends to find out what's going on. That hasn't been possible this year. So that's likely going to continue into the new legislative session. One of the things with the 2020 session being cut short was the elimination of so many bills. We do expect a lot of those measures to be reintroduced, things that we had concerns about. One of them is like the free transit passes for college students, for middle and high school students, and those 65 years and older. I think will likely come back because it's also part of a bigger discussion on transit in the state. Legislation on bus-only lanes, either using shoulders, will likely come back and trying to give priority for transit, and likely revisiting TDA reform efforts that were kind of started a couple of years ago with a task force created by the California Transit Association. Looks like it's going to be revisited and see where they can go from there. And one thing I think, Kate kind of alluded to is with the executive order signed by the governor. This is the last thing I wanted to kind of just highlight for you, is the work of the California State Transportation Agency in trying to implement those. Their work basically started about a little over a year ago, with the first executive order on cap and trade in trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So they've been working on an interagency group for this past year. They provided like a first public kind of discussion at the joint CARB CTC meeting last month. And so their plans are to release a draft report this winter that will outline how they plan to tackle the executive order, implement that, and hold workshops and public comments then before finally releasing their final report sometime June, definitely before the July 15th deadline that's specified in the Executive Order 7920. There's a wide range of topics they're considering. So anything from enhancing the factors for transportation projects to take into consideration VMTs, creating a transit recovery task force, repurpose road space and right of ways so it emphasizes access for transit and active transportation projects, and provide transit operators with the maximum flexibility to serve the most vulnerable populations. As well as one of the topics that was thrown out there was free transit passes as well. So this report won't be final until June sometime, but it could spawn a lot of legislation in how they go about implementing the governor's efforts to reduce VMTs, but also GHG emissions. So, and the last thing is going to be legislation I forgot to mention on the Bay Area, the seamless Bay Area. I assume someone choose going to introduce some form of legislation this early this year. I hope that the content will probably wait for the task force recommendations, but it's going to be keeping a close eye on how that process works. It's going to be time consuming. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Kate. Time consuming is an understatement. But you're right. Assemblymember Chu has been an active participant on the task force. He has that placeholder, but he's also been pretty candid that the state legislator is going to have a different set of priorities in a pandemic world than post-pandemic. Mm-hmm. Transportation was a very hot issue in a pre-pandemic world, and we just don't know how that's going to get prioritized and everything, Steve. But really appreciate your advocacy and overview. So, any questions from directors at this point? Seeing none. Carrie, do we have anyone on the line that wishes to address the board on this item?
I have not seen anyone, no.
All right. And I'm going to ask for a motion that approves the advocacy priorities and also receives a report from the state legislative update from Steve, Platinum Advisors.
Dunbar motion.
First by Mayor.
Second.
Yeah, first by Dunbar. I'm going to give it to Mayor Tekel in honor of her day. So we have first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning. I don't think he's there. Liz Alicio,
Aye.
Jill Tekel,
Aye.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Aye.
Delia Ramos, Paul Doreen,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Carrie Dorman,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Carrie. And Kate, thank you for the overview. Steve, again, thank you for your partnership. All right, moving on to our next item, 11.2. This is the financial statements for fiscal year ending June 2030 and quarter one, and also review of the 5-year budget forecast. I'm going to turn it over to staff. Antonio is going to lead us through the presentation. This is on page 72 to 80. And I just want to remind the board, we still have another 7 items left. So just want to be mindful of our time. Antonio, take it away.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chairman Pedroza and members of the board. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I'm the Finance Director here at NVTA. So for this item, staff is asking the board receive the preliminary unaudited fiscal year end 20 financial statements, also the fiscal year 21 Q1 review, the 5-year budget forecast, and the delegated authority matrix. I have a PowerPoint here, which I'm about to share with you to summarize these statements.
Just for the record, Antonio, this is an informational item only, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
All right. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we do.
Okay. As you know, NVTA's financial records are composed of 3 funds. The Planning Fund, which we refer to the Congestion Management Agency, CMA, or the General Fund. The Transit Fund, which is also known as a proprietary fund. These 2 funds compose the agency's financial position and performance. NVTA is also responsible for a fiduciary fund of the Transportation for Clean Air. However, in the financial statements, the fiduciary fund does not contribute to the agency's financial performance. So this review will focus on the General Fund and the Transit Fund. This presentation summarizes the financial performance for the agency for the fiscal year that just ended on June 30th, 2020. The actual audit will be available at the end of December. And from the audit and this presentation, I don't expect any significant revisions. The audit will just contain additional details as well as provide context to some of the numbers. So with that, we will begin. So for this slide, it presents an overall view of the revenues and expenditures for the fiscal year that just ended June 30th, 2020 compared to the previous fiscal year. As you can see, overall, total revenues were nearly $1 million higher than the previous year. In the CMA, you'll notice a drop in the current year to the previous year. This is intentional. NVTA's budgets are on a biennial basis, and we accumulate assets in the first year of the biennial budget, usually the odd number year. So in the first year of this 2-year cycle, you'll see assets accumulate and increase. Then as the agency begins to spend down those monetary assets in the second year, the revenue recognition is not as high as in the second year. As for the transit revenues, there was a significant increase, but this was due to 2 reasons, specific reasons. The purchase of real estate adjacent to the new transit maintenance facility and grant funds received for 4 new cutaway Glaval buses for the fixed route, as well as the paratransit services of Vine Transit. We also received a partial allocation of CARES Act funding that was utilized in the fiscal year. I'll provide some additional details of the CARES Act during the first quarter review portion of this presentation. So overall, there was an increase in revenues in fiscal year 20 over the previous year. If you look at the middle table, for the CMA, expenditures consist of agency salaries, administration, and transportation related projects. As for some of the more notable larger projects that staff was overseeing on the transportation side of the agency was work on the Imola Park and Ride project, design environmental phases related to Soskel Junction, and of course, pre-construction work for the Calistoga to St. Helena section of the Vine Trail. NVTA staff was also working with financial advisors for the TIFIA loan for the new transit maintenance facility. For transit, you'll see a small uptick in expenses. Operational expenses were muted due to the pandemic from mid-March to the end of the fiscal year, where Vine Transit reduced service hours by nearly 20% and went to an on-demand model for the local fixed route service, while temporarily ceasing fare collections. Transit services in all the other jurisdictions were also reduced in terms of their service hours. Additionally, the agency recognized an impairment charge of $661,000, which is a fancy way of saying we wrote down some of our assets because of the disposal of our 8 New Flyer vehicles. If we remove the write-down, then the expenses in public transit actually decreased from the previous year, but that was mainly due to the extraordinary events related to COVID and cutting non-essential operational costs. Capital purchases was mainly for the purchase of real estate, about $1.6 million, purchase of 4 new transit vehicles and some transit-related equipment purchased this year. And that made up the totality of our capital investments for the year. As you notice, in the previous year, capital investments were pretty nil, just a few upgrades and equipment purchases. So overall, there was a modest decrease in our net position. But if you remove the depreciation charge, which on our books is considered a part of an operational expense, those small deficits in the transit fund would have flipped into positive territory. This slide gives a snapshot of the revenues and expenditures illustrated in a pie chart for the Congestion Management Agency. As you can see, it's pretty typical with TDA providing half of the recognized revenues, federal sources coming in around 17%, and then other sources providing the remainder. Other sources include annual membership contributions to NVTA and the Vine Trail Coalition contributions. These ratios will likely shift in the current year and in future years. We have several transportation-related projects in the pre-construction phase, which are usually funded by local funds, primarily by TDA. When the projects transition into the construction phase, federal funds and other revenue sources will pay for a majority of those costs. So the expectation is that we'll see a shift in these percentages on the revenue side. As I mentioned earlier, consulting services expenditures were mainly for the work on the Vine Trail, Imola Park and Ride project, Soskel Junction, and a bevy of smaller transportation-related projects. Okay. Here's a snapshot for the public transit. These ratios are nearly a carbon copy of the prior year, although federal sources did have a small uptick due to a partial allocation of CARES Act funds. Operational fare blocks declined due to the non-collection of fares. There was also rescissions in state transit assistance of about $70,000 and regional Measure 2 toll collection funds of about $36,000. Regional Measure 2 funds are for the Route 29, dedicated for the Route 29, for the Route 29 Express to the El Cerrillo del Norte BART station. Transit funds are generated through fuel excise taxes and are collected from the bridge tolls. And RM2 through the bridge tolls. Because of the stay-at-home order, which was mainly affected in the last quarter of the fiscal year, the hit to revenues was difficult, but it was manageable. Although the revenue shortfalls have been accounted for in the new budget year, staff is looking a way to obviously backfill those funding gaps, especially for state transit assistance. And we are expecting less regional measure 2 funds in the current year as well, of what it was with our normal allocation. Okay, I'm going to be moving on to the first quarter's review. So for this portion of the presentation, the first quarter tends to be a little bit slow in getting the data into the general ledger while staff focuses on closing the books for the end of the previous fiscal year. So there tends to be some timing issues and some lags in the recognition of revenues or expenses or vice versa. I want to make a couple points on this slide. The annual revenues for the CMA of the annual revenues for the CMA of 20.7 million is because of 2 very large projects that are progressing. Basically Sosco Junction, which will, and the Vine Trail, which will end, will begin its construction phases in the current year, as well as out into future years. Removing those 2 special projects, expected revenues for the year is about $7 million, give or take, which is about the average for the CMA budget. For public transit, we actually recognize $5 million in the first quarter. I mentioned the CARES Act a few minutes ago. NVTA received a total of $4.5 million in CARES Act funding. About 500,000 of that was used in the previous fiscal year, and the remainder is recognized for this fiscal year. Understanding the urgent need, the Federal Transit Administration allowed NVTA to draw down the entire balance of the CARES Act funding upfront rather than on a reimbursement basis, which is how most FTA operational grants are dispersed. And as I said, this is a timing issue. We got all the money up front. So we will start spending down those revenues, matching up with the expenditures as we move along into the fiscal year. I also wanted to point out that when NVTA's budget for transit was approved back in April, prior to that, MTC didn't inform NVTA of its second allocation of CARES Act funding. And so that wasn't budgeted for that. That resulted in a pandemic-induced deficit of about $1 million for the first year of the 2-year biennial budget. With the second tranche of the CARES Act, we've actually overcome that $1 million deficit. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that we are still facing challenges in the second year of the biennial budget with nearly a $2 million deficit. We're hoping for additional stimulus from the federal government, but as you know, negotiations have stalled for at least for the currently, and probably won't restart until a new administration takes control of the federal government. Any new federal authorizations, appropriations, or additional stimulus will likely be deferred until a new administration takes control, and we, of course, monitoring the situation daily. The memo also includes the 5-year forecast and the delegated authorities' actions since July. What I wanted to leave you with this is that, as in your respective jurisdictions, NVTA's is facing a slew of challenges, financial as well as operational, but they are not insurmountable. Staff monitors the agency's financial position daily and looks at the data and considers information from as many reputable sources as possible. We are still moving forward full steam ahead to deliver the projects and transit services for the public. This concludes my report. As the chair has mentioned, this is an information only item and no formal action needs to be taken. And at this time, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Antonio. Very concise presentation. You definitely give us confidence that our finances are well watched. So thank you for that. And I'll just illustrate the importance of the CARES funding, of what that did to an agency like ours is so critical. And this is why another stimulus is going to be needed in the future. So with that, I'll see if there's any question from any directors. All right, seeing no questions. Antonio, thank you very much for your presentation. And we're going to move on. And before I do that, Carrie, did we have any members of the public that had questions on this item?
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself. No, I don't see anyone.
All right, thank you. This is an informational item, so we'll move on to the next item. This is 11.3, fiscal year 19 to 29, the Napa County Short Range Transit Plan. This is found on page 81 to 83. I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Good afternoon. Danielle Schmitz here to present item 11.3, the draft short range transit plan for fiscal years 2019 through 2029. Every 4 years, NVTA completes an SRTP, which is a plan that looks at a snapshot reporting period. In this case, it's for fiscal years 2014 through 2015 to 2018 to 2019. And it also looks at a 10-year horizon for transit operations and funding. The review of transit performance standards, such as revenues per passenger mile, ridership, fare box recovery, et cetera, provide a benchmark for various services and allow transit planners to understand where improvements may be warranted. The SRTP is a requirement of MTC to receive certain transit fundings under FTA and regional measure funds as well. The reporting period for this SRTP came just before the NVTA fully developed the VINE vision, which, as you remember, was the comprehensive operations analysis the VINE services went through. That is why, while flipping through the plan, you'll recognize a lot of charts of the key performance indicators that were measured in the COA, and they'll look familiar to you. Changes to the regional and express routes were implemented in April of last year of 2019, and the new VINE Vision 2, which was the service in the city of Napa, wasn't implemented until January of 2020. After the VINE Vision was fully operational in January, we just had a few short years of ridership looking favorably, trending upwards until COVID-19 pandemic disrupted transit ridership and caused precipitous declines across the system. NVTA staff has been nimble to make changes that fit transit ridership declines. This has included taking the fixed route service to 100% on demand, reducing service hours on the regional fixed routes, suspending low performing services, as well as reducing the hours of operation for many of the community shuttles to match the demand. NVTA will continue to monitor transit performance metrics on a quarterly basis, revisit available funding and demand, and make changes to the system as necessary. And those are kind of the future outlooks that we put in the SRTP. NVTA has submitted a draft SRTP plan to MTC for review and comment, and has not received any comments back from MTC of changes needed. Staff is asking the NVTA board to approve the SRTP and allow staff to make any minor administrative changes that document may need. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, Carrie, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the board on this item?
No.
Danielle, thank you very much for a very succinct presentation. This is an action item, so I will entertain a motion for approval. Is that Liz?
Yes, I jumped in. Yeah.
Okay. First by member Director Alessio.
Second
Joseph. By thank you, Director Joseph. Roll call vote, please.
Excuse me. Leon Garcia.
Yes.
Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Chris Canning is still absent, right? Liz Alicio.
Aye.
Jill Teckle.
Aye.
Alfredo Pedroza.
Aye.
Belia Ramos.
She had to step out.
Paul Doreen.
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth.
Yes.
Carrie Dorman.
Yes.
And John Dunbar.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next item, 11.4. This is VINE Transit Service in support of the Emergency Operations Center. Danielle will be providing us a presentation. This is on page 84 86, and I know Vice Chair Alessio also had some interest in this, and I want to thank her for bringing this up. Danielle, take it away.
Yes, item 11.4, Vine Transit Services in support of the Emergency Operations Center for the County of Napa. To date, Vine Transit has logged over 1,000 hours and incurred over 71,000 in support services responding to emergency operations requests since March. NVTA staff has also provided over 400 hours of staff time toward emergency operations coordination between TransDev and the county. To provide a retrospective overview, on March 27th, NVTA was activated under the operations branch of the Napa County EOC. The main transit activity the EOC the main transit activity of the EOC has been delivering meals 3 times a day to housing and sheltering site. So this includes quarantine members of the public that are in quarantine or isolation sites, as well as congregate living sites such as the winter and south shelters. During the fire, this operation has been expanded to include meal service delivery for all the fire evacuation sites and first responders. So at the height of meal delivery, TransDev was delivering over 2,000 meals daily for about a couple weeks during the late September and early October. Since April, the Vine has also been delivering food to vulnerable populations countywide through the community organizations activated in disaster. There are typically 4 of these a month, and they range from locations all the way to Pope Valley and down to American Canyon. During the LNU fire, transit vehicles were put on notice to evacuate St. Helena Hospital, but were not needed because the county had a fleet of ambulances to do that evacuation. But again, September 28th, we were put on notice to evacuate Calistoga. We did deploy 8 transit vehicles. I guess the good thing is that Calistoga had a long time of a evacuation advisory, so that gave residents there enough time to leave. So we only needed to evacuate 9 individuals that didn't have a ride on September 28th. But we also provided transportations to dozens of fire evacuees during the subsequent week to various sheltering sites and hotel sites. We also were helped transport residents back up to Calistoga during the repopulation efforts when the evacuation orders were lifted. It goes without saying, this has been a marathon and emergency event for NVTA and TransDev staff. As Kate mentioned at our last board meeting, we are very appreciative of TransDev's efforts serving the Napa community, and I believe the general manager, Cheryl Drakes, on this call today, as well as operations manager, Charlene Hicks, that have answered many of phone calls and texts in the middle of the night from myself or Kate or NVTA staff. And so we just want to thank them for being very responsive to the community's needs. And that's the end of my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Great presentation. I think it's so critical that we pause to acknowledge the role that we play during disasters. We definitely have some experience at doing this now, so thank you for that report. Vice Chair Alessio, did you have any comments to make around this item?
I just want to say, extend my appreciation to, it's sitting on a board. We don't know all the hard work that goes behind the scenes, as we've talked about with Carrie's departure and all the work that, Mayor Tekel's done behind the scenes, but certainly the staff, the people that are on the ground in the trenches and are doing things above and beyond for our community and for those who are vulnerable. So thank you very much for this report. I wish, there's a way we can get this out so we can tell our story of what NVTA does and the impact it has on our communities countywide.
We will definitely incorporate that in the county's action plan, Vice Chair, just to really embed this into some of the hot washes that we have after an incident or an emergency is wrapped up. So great comments. Any other questions, comments from directors? Carrie, do we have any member of the public that wishes to address this item? Carrie, I see you're still muted.
Yeah, can't get there quick enough. No, I don't see any. Thank you.
All right. So this was just an informational item. Danielle, thank you for the presentation. Let's move on to our next item, 11.5. This is the Vine Transit update. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca and Libby. This is an informational item as well.
Great, thank you. My name is Rebecca Schenk. I'm a principal planner here at the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and I'll be taking you through item 11.5, which is just informational. And we'll provide you with the operational performance of the collective Vine Transit service for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2020 through 2021, which is from July 1st, 2020 through September 30th of 2020. So I guess one quarter later than what Antonia was presenting on earlier. And I want to thank NVTA's newest employee, Libby Payan, for gathering the data for this presentation. And I believe you can see the PowerPoint, hopefully. Okay. So it's touched on by Danielle in both of our last two items. What I'm going to be touching on is the first quarter of fiscal year 2020 through 2021, which, as I mentioned, is from July to September. But what I wanted to compare it to, we always compare it to the prior fiscal year, right, in the same quarter, and we're going to be doing that. But I also wanted to compare it to the fourth quarter for fiscal year 1920, so the prior 3 months being from April to June. So you can see kind of where we're at in comparison within the pandemic. And this is just a reminder about what our schedule was doing, say, pre-COVID versus during COVID, and then in our latest quarter with COVID plus fires. And so again, I'll be comparing the three kind of time periods here. So think of this as pre-COVID being this time, basically last year, and where we were at in terms of our local routes in the city of Napa, our Route 10, 11, 10X, 11X, 21, and 29. As you'll see, the precipitous drop that happened starting where this data says in April with our overall ridership, and it's pretty much universal across all the routes. And we weren't operating the 10 and 11 during that time. So that's why there's no data on that particular item. And then you'll see that in this latest quarter, kind of during COVID, that we did see a small uptick in terms of our ridership compared with prior COVID levels. And at that point, we were in the orange level throughout Napa County, and we'll see what being back in purple kind of means for our overall transit ridership. So stay tuned. And the patterns that we saw with kind of our fixed route, we also saw in our community shuttles. So this is showing also the change from the prior year's first quarter, and then looking at the fourth quarter and the current first quarter. Biggest drops, I guess, yeah, if you look at percentage wise anyways, it would be the Yountville trolley. And there have been specifically strict restrictions at the Yountville Veterans Home, which has had an impact on our ridership there. And then looking at the first quarter of 2020/2021 for our local service, as you'll remember, we kind of operated fixed route service in the first quarter of this fiscal year 1920, and then moved on to on demand. And this is showing our passengers per revenue hour. So basically all of the hours that we are active currently between 7:30 and 5:30 when the vehicle is in service. And we set a threshold, right, where we're under normal times, we would expect us to, at a minimum, have 8 passengers per revenue hour per NVTA's policies, which you'll see in the red line. And we would have exceeded that during the prior fiscal year, but we are well below that utilizing our on-demand service. There is a slight uptick from just under 2 passengers per revenue hour to 2.3 per revenue hour. And then looking just at one individual quarter, which is our most recent for our regional services, same story, right? In terms of passenger per revenue hour, we'd expect closer to 12 passengers per revenue hour, and where we are in the latest quarter is well beyond, well below that, at about half of it for the routes 10 and 11, and well below that on the routes 21 and 29. What I will say, what is tricky in this circumstances, right, is that this is really a product of 2 things. 1, demand, and 2, being adhering to the Bay Area Healthy Transit Plan, which puts a limit on the number of riders per vehicle to allow for 6 feet of social distancing. So for example, on a 40-foot bus, at a period of time, we needed to adhere to a 6-foot foot of social distance. That'd be 6 passengers. And then as the plans kind of evolved and they're looking at minimizing that to 3 foot of distance, that would be 13 passengers. And in cases where we're seeing, especially on the route 10 and 11, certain times of day when we've seen more passengers, we are sending a second bus to kind of act as a trailer to try to keep social distancing in place. And then on our on-demand, right, same story again, looking at passengers per revenue hour. Normally we would expect about 4 passengers per revenue hour on average, and we are well below that in each of our jurisdictions, with American Canyon seeing the highest passengers per revenue hour as it currently stands. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great presentation. I apologize. I think I cut off there. I was trying to make a joke that there's a rumor out there that all the ridership on the trolley was done by Mayor Dunbar.
It's possible 1 or 2 people could have made it happen if they rode all day.
He was trying to drive his numbers up, but again, I think it's very critical just to provide that overview. And I know that one of the things that we could all do is talk about the safety of public transit. You know, we received a notice of the day from our healthcare provider that talked about concerns about public transit. And I think this is where we can all talk about what have we done to make sure that there's the rider confidence to get back on these systems, because it is critical. We see when there's a decline in ridership, what it does to the financial impacts of these systems. So again, really great report. Rebecca, any questions from directors for Rebecca? Seeing none. Any members of the public? Carrie, have any questions for this item?
No, I don't see any.
All right, this was an informational item only. Rebecca, again, thank you for your presentation. Let's move on to our next item. This is the amendment number 12 to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Joint Powers Agreement. This is on page 94 to 125. This is an action item. I'm going to turn it over to Antonio.
Good afternoon again. For the item before you, staff is asking the board to consider and approve the proposed revisions to the NVTA Joint Powers Agreement, Amendment number 12, and direct staff to circulate the revisions to its member jurisdictions for approval by the respective city town councils and the Napa County Board of Supervisors. The proposed revisions are necessary to clarify language in the JPA relating to federal debt obligations, and also to memorialize the annual contributions from the member agencies. I'm going to hand this item over to NVTA's legal counsel, Deanne Gillick, regarding the revisions and to explain the revisions. But before I do that, I also wanted to introduce Paul Chrisman, also an attorney at Sloan Sakai, who has been assisting Deanne and staff on this project. With that, I will hand it off over to Deanne.
Yes, hi. This is Deanne Gillick, General Counsel for NVTA, and thank you, Tony. Also, that's been working with me is Paul Chrisman of Sloan Sakai. We also had these items reviewed by NVTA's bond counsel that's assisting with the financing package for the maintenance facility, Barney Allison with Nossaman, and he is in agreement and concurrence with our recommendations. For sake of the meeting and brevity, I'm going to summarize the 4 categories of changes and recommended amendments to the JPA agreement. And then I'm happy to go through them individually at the board's request or respond to questions. And as Carrie has put up on the screen, our memo is at page 123 of the packet and goes through each individual change and recommended amendment and the reasons for that. There's 4 categories of recommended edits, and I'll just summarize those 4 categories and then respond to any questions. The first are the ones that we recommend are necessary in order to implement the funding that is being pursued for the maintenance facility, and those are to section 7.1 and 8.4.2 to the JPA agreement. The concern and why it's felt that it's necessary is that the current agreement limits the JPA's ability. There's ambiguity and inconsistency on the NVTA's ability to obtain the debt that's being pursued. The second category is for clarification, as it was deemed that some edits are necessary. There's a couple additional edits that are being recommended for clarification due to the pursuit of the debt in the maintenance facility. And that is the section 5.2S and 8.3.3. The fourth category is to memorialize the membership fee as one of the components of the funding request and the representation with the federal funding sources is the membership fees that were implemented last year from the member agencies. And that fee is being documented and memorialized in the proposed edits. And then finally, a category of cleanup items, typos, as well as the deletion of the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority reference. So that's a summary. I'm happy to go through the details. They are set forth as well in the memo. The request at this time is to have this board consider these edits and requests. And then the next steps would be to circulate the recommended amendments to each member jurisdiction, as this is a joint powers agency, which requires the actual JPA agreement to be approved by the member agencies. So I'm happy to respond to questions or go into specific edits individually, or also Paul Christman is available to respond to the financing issues as well.
All right, thank you very much for being brief. And just a process question. So we will provide direction today. It sounds like, do we tentatively approve and then we circulate it back and then it comes back to the board for final ratification?
Yeah, the recommendation would be to approve this draft for consideration by the member agencies. So the board has approved the language and makes the formal requests to the member agencies for approval.
But the board will be seeing it one more time again?
That's correct. After the member agencies approve, the board would do a final adoption to set the effective date and to approve the final.
Thank you very much, Ian. Great discussion. All right, Director Carey.
Thank you. So I have an overall question and a specific question. My overall question, I think, is for NVTA staff. Given everything that's happening, the timing of this, our budget situation, the fact that a new administration in Washington may be bringing more tech dollars, are we having any additional thoughts on the timing or scope of the actual maintenance facility we're trying to finance?
Well, I think, Carrie, that our larger challenge is moving forward with this project in order to have electrification for our vehicles, because we have no other options, and balancing the extraordinary cost of the facility with how much it will cost next year and the year after that. We anticipate that there could be anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million in construction escalation costs if we don't move quickly now. The other thing that we're racing against is the TIFIA loan is now well under 1%, and borrowing at that rate is something that I really want to take advantage of. It locks us in for a very long time, and I think will give us a lot more financial flexibility and allow us to be a little bit more nimble moving forward. The other thing about, I would remind you about the TIFIA loan, is that the first 5 years, we have the option of paying only the interest, and we don't have to pay down the principal. So, I hope that answers your question. I can't emphasize strongly enough the significance and the importance of moving forward on this project now.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, I think, goes to Ms. Gillick. Removing section 8.4.2, which I believe you said was a necessity in order to get, I'm assuming, the TIFIA loan, what funds does that put at risk? What funds does that make susceptible to collection in the unlikely event of a default, that if we left that section in would not be susceptible to being part of funds collected?
Yeah, I will respond. And then, Paul Christmas is also on the line, who is has expertise in the financing in the bond arena. The language that's being requested to being deleted is the sentence that says NVTA may not obligate itself beyond the monies due to NVTA under this agreement, plus any monies on hand or irrevocably pledged to its support from other agencies. So the concern is that beyond the secured funding, that this language might limit, other NVTA sources and other NVTA funding. And I know Tony's on the line as well to talk about specific pots of money, which I'm not necessarily intimately familiar with the pots of money. But the intent is not to open it up to sources that are not intended for this facility, but just to place to remove any limitation that other funds that might properly be available for the maintenance facility could be spent for the purposes.
So thank you. And I am interested in what pots of money would be opened up and what pots of money would remain secure from being called on in the event of a default.
Great. Can staff answer that question?
Yeah, this is Antonio Honorado. I can answer that question. So the pots of money that are secured are these dedicated grant funds specifically for the maintenance facility. So there are some federal funds, but the pots of money on the other side of that we want to have as flexible as possible is in regards to state transit assistance, Transportation Development Act funds, and other capital funds that can be used specifically for the maintenance facility. So it really is the pots of money that are available to us for this project, as well as for operational purposes. This just takes away some of the ambiguity in the language of the JPA.
Carrie, to be clear, we can't use federal funds to pay down for making payment on the TIFIA loan. So I want to make that very clear.
Sorry, Kate, we can or cannot?
We cannot use federal funds to pay down the TIFIA loan.
Okay, so I guess here's my bottom line question as a hypothetical. In the slides you just showed, Mr. Honorado, it showed that 51% of our CMA revenue was TDA dollars, 41% of public transit revenue was TDA dollars, and together those are about $7,000, maybe a little more, almost $8,000. So are those available now in the event of a bond default? That's my first question. And my second question is, if we take this language out, would it make them available when they otherwise are not?
So I can answer the first part.
Well, Tony, let me just respond. I don't think that this language is going to restrict the funds that we're putting on the table to fund the finance or the maintenance facility. I think this language restricts our ability, or it's fuzzy. I'm not an attorney, but when you read it, it looks as if the agreement does not allow us to enter into any sort of arrangement where we would exceed the amount of monies that we have available. We are going to be pledging future funds for this project, so that's why this clause is conflicting with it, right? We're committing future fare box revenues, we're committing future STA, we're committing for future TDA funds to pay the debt on this particular project. What we are working on right now is an agreement with MTC where they would actually just divert automatically the Transportation Development Act funds and the amount of the payment directly to the Build America Bureau, who's, again, the agency that manages TIFIA funds. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Carrie. And then also I would just add that you're about ready to, or you approved as part of the consent calendar today, our ability to go to MTC to request a letter of no prejudice, which would be able then to use Regional Measure 3 funds if they come to fruition to pay down this debt as well. So that's another item that we're trying to arrange to minimize the exposure of the agency here and to make sure that we minimize the amount of money that we have to borrow for a long period of time.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. That was a good summary. Thank you.
Director Dorman, any
No, I think I'm just, sorry, I'm not making my questions clear. So I think we can just move on. Thank you. That was good, all good information though. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Dorman. Any other directors have any questions? All right, Carrie, do we have any member of the public that wishes to address the board on this item?
I don't see any, no.
All right, I want to thank staff for their thoughtful responses. And Director Dorman, thank you for raising those questions as well. All right, at this point, I will entertain a motion for approval.
Garcia.
Move, Ellsworth.
Thank you. First by Mayor Garcia, second by Mayor Ellsworth. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Liz Alicio,
Aye.
Jill Teckle. She's still on.
She was going to transition to a phone call, so she might be in the transition period.
Alfredo Pedroza.
Yes.
Belia Ramos is still off. Paul Doreen,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Carrie Dorman,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Aye.
Right.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next item. This is 11.7, the First Amendment to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Agreement, number 20-14 with KNN Public Finance LLC. This is found on page 126 to 134. I'm going to turn it over to Antonio.
So back at the August meeting, the NVTA Board of Directors approved Agreement 2014 for professional services with KNN Finance to help secure a TIFIA loan through the Build America Bureau to construct the new Vine Transit maintenance facility. Prior to the start of services, NVTA staff, with the assistance of the former financial advisors, submitted a letter of interest to the Build America Bureau with a proposed funding package. A portion of the funding package submitted to the Build America Bureau for consideration included Regional Measure 3, the $3 increase in bridge tolls. The California Supreme Court recently announced a decision to hear an appeal of RM3, which could significantly delay securing these funds for the maintenance facility. Without securing RM3 funds, NVTA must complete a new funding package identifying another source replacing those RM3 funds. The amendment to the current agreement will provide NVTA with assistance from KNN to backfill the RM3 grant funds by obtaining a second loan from most likely from a private banking institution, and developing the financing structure and pay down terms for the loan. Provide support during NVTA's credit review process, which we'll have to go through again, and then help resubmitting an indicative debt rating letter request to Moody's Investment Services. That concludes my report, and we can answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Any questions from board directors? Director Dorman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Honorado. So how much is the RM3 contribution did we expect that we are going to look for private financing?
It was up to $10 million. But for the private financing, we're looking to cut that in half to $5 million.
Okay. And have you had an opportunity to run any scenarios on what this will do to our debt service numbers? Because as I recall, we were already pretty tight on those.
Yeah, so we're actually speaking to two banks right now. And in the next few days, they are supposed to submit to us funding proposals on the debt service, and then also what that debt service would do to our indicative rating for Moody's. So we are in discussion with two banks, and we hope to hear from them hopefully by next week, actually, or just the week after the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay, and if we were looking to up to 10 million for RM3, how are we finessing 5 million in a private loan? The other 5.
So in our original financing package planned with the Build America Bureau, we only needed 15 million of the 20 million available for the TIFIA loan. And so we're going to expand the loan with TIFIA up to the allowable cap, which is about almost $20 million, and then have an additional $5 million with a banking institution.
Okay, thank you. And when we get this information in a couple of days from the banks, will you be bringing that back to us at our December meeting?
Well, we are going to present a financing package to the board of directors, so you can formally sign off on it. And that will actually start the process to make public the invitation for bid for the construction portion to acquire a construction company as well as a construction manager. And so, yes, the answer to your question is yes, we will.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dr. Norman, we're not going to be looking at this until spring in terms of actually having the complete financing package together. Hopefully we'll have some more knowledge about what's going on with Regional Measure 3 then to give everybody some confidence, including staff who are somewhat concerned about this. But the other difference that could occur is that we could be in a very promising bid environment where the cost of the project is actually well below or below the engineering estimate. And then the other thing that we really want to move on is this ridiculously low interest rate on the TIFIA, which is we have our counterpart in Monterey just closed on their TIFIA loan, same structure, the rural program, and it was 0.78%. So that was a lot lower than what we expected. So we think that our capacity for borrowing is going to be a little bit better because our payments are going to be lower than what we expected. So like I said, a lot of moving parts. We'll bring it all to the board with a complete picture so you have an understanding, a much clearer understanding of where we want to go with this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dorman. Director Joseph.
Yes, so if I understand where we stand, because RM3 is still tied up in court, we're now pursuing some private financing because RM3 isn't available. So the two questions would be any kind of time frame on when we're going to find out definitively whether RM3 is in or out. And then secondly, is there a way that we can get out of the private financing if RM3 is upheld and we have that source?
Right, so that's the purpose of the letter of no prejudice. We won't know whether RM3 is in until this court case has been settled, which could result, I mean, it could go a lot of different directions. The Supreme Court could say, yes, we're going to let this go, and we're not going to side with the Howard Jarvis taxpayer folks. Or it could send it back to the lower court, which means it could be tied up for 4 years. But there is no expiration on a letter of no prejudice. So ultimately, if the Regional Measure 3 funds flow and we receive them, then we can pay off the debt. And we are working with the North Bay Commissioners on the fund sources that we plan on using, the subset of Regional Measure 3 funds, which is the North Bay Transit funds. And we're hoping to be splitting those funds on a formula basis, which will give us a little bit more security about how much we could apportion to this project. I mean, ultimately, we could maybe pay off the entire loan, ideally. So, but again, with a couple unknowns, Regional Measure 3, is it going to succeed or not? And also how much money. But the letter of no prejudice is that if MTC approves it, which again will come forward with your funding package, is not going to, we're not using that to secure the loans. And I want to make that clear, but it will give us some confidence that if those monies become available, we'll be able to pay off some of the debt.
So then the question I really have is, we're spending 25 grand plus staff time to secure a private loan because we don't know about RM3. If RM3 works out and we can access it, what are we stuck with on the private loan? Is there an early call or do we have to pay it off and all that.
Yeah, so the TIPIA loan, there's no early prepayment penalty. And then the private loan is going to be more of a construction loan. We're going to be drawing it down as we need it. And then we are also making sure that if there's any prepayment penalty, it's very nominal.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mayor Dunbar.
Yeah, I think these have been very good clarifying answers. Thank you, Antonio and Kate. I'm ready to make a motion that we accept the staff recommendation on this item.
All right, we have a motion, but before we do that, let me see if there's any member of the public that wish to comment on this item. Carrie, do we have anyone?
I don't see anyone, no.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Dunbar.
I'll second.
I apologize. I only can see 6 people at a time on my screen, so I don't know who speaks.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Alessio. All right, we have first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Liz Alicio,
Aye.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Aye.
Paul Doreen,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Carrie Dorman,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. That concludes our regular items. Do we have any future agenda items from the board? Seeing none, we do have a need for closed session. I'll turn it over to council to read the item.
The board will meet in closed session on the items listed on the agenda, which includes the public employee performance evaluation of the executive director. And we will remain, some of us on here for the board commission to return to open session and finalize the meeting.
So are we staying on this Zoom link, or is there another one that was sent?
I believe there's, go ahead, Karen.
We will be doing what we did last month. Kathy will be putting you guys into a breakout room.
Okay.
And then you'll come back. Oh, you were,
Right.
I think you'd already left by last time. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is new to me.
Yeah, so you'll get a little message from Kathy, or well, you get a little message that you're going into the breakout room.
All right.
And when you come out of the breakout room, you'll have 2 options: to leave the meeting or return to the meeting. So return to the meeting. Don't leave the meeting. Okay.
All right.
If I'm necessary, I'm sorry. If I'm needed, just let Carrie or Kate or someone know, you know, and I will join you or respond to questions.
All right. So we'll wait for Kathy to put us in the room.
Thank you.
And we're
Hey,
back.
we're back.
We are back.
All right.
Look how tech savvy we all have become.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Mark remembered our directions.
Yeah, I got it all figured out, and now I'm leaving.
All right. Carrie, are we back?
We are back. Yes.
Do I have the permission to go?
Yes.
All right. We are back from our closed session, and we have no reportable action. So at this time, it is my pleasure to adjourn to our canceled meeting Wednesday, December 16th. So we will have another meeting that will be properly noticed and scheduled. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
Thanksgiving.
All the best, Carrie.
Bye, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Enjoy your retirement.
Exactly.
Peace.